Hi, welcome to Learning Kitchen Live, Home Edition. I'm Jessica Birch, one of the dietitians at Community Servings. Welcome to my kitchen. So today I'm going to be sharing a recipe with Caribbean roots. It's a meal that you can make for a family of 4 with some leftovers. And the best part about that is that this meal, you can buy all the ingredients for under $15. And so for all of the classes that I'm going to be teaching on Learning Kitchen Live for the rest of 2021, my focus is going to be providing recipes and guidance on how to make really delicious, nutritious meals for a family of 4 for $15 or less. To really prove that you don't have to break the bank to feed your family in a really delicious and nutritious way. So with that being said, let's get started. If you're just joining now, this is Learning Kitchen Live Home Edition. I'm Jessica Birch, one of the dietitians at Community Servings, and we are going to be making coconut red beans with tangy collards and brown rice. And this is a recipe that I adapted from the Old Ways African Heritage and Health curriculum. The flavors are super delicious. It's a really easy, really approachable meal. And yeah, let's just get started. So we're going to be talking about the importance of adding some meatless meals into your regular routine. We're going to talk about, as always, enhancing flavors with things other than salt. And as I said, we're going to be making a meal for 4. So what we're going to do first is I'm going to just heat up my pan here. And I'm going to put about 1.5 teaspoons, 2 teaspoons of olive oil in the bottom of my pan. And this is going to be for our collard greens. And I always forget to say at the beginning, but at the end of the class, I'm going to post the recipe in the comment section below the video. And so if you'd like to have the recipe, give it a try for yourself, please go there, and it will be there with all the nutrition facts information as well. So we're just going to coat the bottom of our pan with some olive oil. And then to this, I'm going to add half an onion, chopped up, and get it all out of there. And we're going to let that start to cook a little bit. You want the onion to caramelize because that's going to give some more flavor to your dish. The more time that you have to cook things, the more intense flavors typically are, as long as you don't burn them, right? But if you don't have a lot of time, you can still make this meal fairly quickly just by letting these onions have a little bit of time to caramelize before we add anything else. So what I'm gonna do is show you how I cut up the collard greens. So if you're not familiar with collards, they're just another type of green that gives you tons of nutrients, fiber, vitamins, minerals, all the good stuff that you want. If kale isn't your friend, but everybody says kale is the superfood you need to include in your diet, collards is a great way to go because it has almost all of the same nutrients, and it has a slightly less intense flavor. My husband doesn't like kale. He says I put it in too many things, but he does really like collards. It cooks down a little bit easier, and the flavor isn't as intense, as I said. So, like kale, collard greens has a pretty thick stem right down the middle. You can leave this in if you're going to be cooking for a longer period of time, but if you just have a short amount of time to prepare your meal, I recommend just cutting it out. And so what we do, or what I do, is I'm trying to figure out how to show this. Because my cutting board's down here. I fold it in half so that you can see what's this, stem? And I just cut at an angle to take the stem out. That's all. I have a friend that pickles these. Apparently they're delicious pickles. You could do that. Or you could put it in your compost or your garbage or whatever it is. And so then you have your slightly mutilated collard leaf. All right, before I go on with the collards, let me just add my garlic because my onions are getting nice and golden. And so then I'm putting in 3 cloves of minced garlic or use a garlic press. Ooh, smells so good. I'm gonna just turn the heat down so this doesn't burn while I get everything else going. Okay, so I have 3 collard greens here. You can do as many at a time as you want, but then what we're gonna do is we're gonna stack them and then we're gonna roll them into a little, they call this a cigar. I guess it's a cigar. And then you just chop down to make little ribbons, about 1/4 inch in thickness. Okay. And so then you've got these little ribbons. And I'm gonna take those and just add them to my bowl. And before I put them into my pan here to cook, I'm gonna add in 2 teaspoons of Dijon mustard. And this is what gives it the tang. If you don't like mustard, you can leave it out. It doesn't have to be Dijon. It can be regular yellow mustard. The Dijon just gives it a little bit more of a punch. All right, and I'm gonna stir that around. That smells delicious. I'm gonna stir that around with my garlic and my onions, just to integrate everything through. And this is really gonna give a lot of flavor to these collards. All right, dump the collards in. And nice big steaming bowl of delicious smelling greens, and we've barely even started cooking. Okay, oops. And I'm just gonna scrape those in. Then to this I'm gonna add 1/2 cup of water, and this is just gonna help steam the greens and let them cook a little bit faster. A lid. And then we're gonna switch burners and put this on low. And 1/2 or 1/3 of our meal is cooking. You don't have to do anything else. Pretty easy, and it's gonna have some really delicious flavors and tons of nutrients. Okay, is that on? That is on. So next, I'm gonna get my beans started, and then we'll talk about everything. So I'm going to heat up my pan. And this is really easy too, and I love, love, love the flavors that go into this. If using these flavors isn't something that you usually do, I really encourage you to give it a try. It's a whole different flavor profile, really rich, really delicious. Okay, so I put in more olive oil than I meant to right then. You only really need like 2 teaspoons, just enough to coat the bottom of the pan. And to this, once that heats up evenly, I am going to add the other 1/2 of my onion. Give that a stir and let that start to cook. So as I said at the beginning, this meal that I'm preparing is a meal for 4 with some leftovers for less than $15. I actually spent $14.69 on all of my ingredients. That included lemon juice and mustard because I didn't have any in the house. And what it did not include though was olive oil and the spices. So, depending on how things balance out, it's right in that $15 range. I also bought a whole bag of brown rice, and that actually has 12 servings in it, so that's gonna last for multiple meals. I got canned beans because I didn't have the time to soak dried beans. But again, if you're trying to find ways to make sure that you're getting the best nutrition for you and your family, you can always get dried beans. If cost is a question, dried beans are great. They're really inexpensive. They last forever. And it just takes a little bit more thought ahead of time as to making sure that you soak them and you have a little bit of time to cook them. Canned beans are easy because you don't have to think about those things, and they are really inexpensive and widely available as well. The thing that I would say about canned beans that you need to remember is, if you can, pick one that has no added salt or low sodium. That will just mean that you're getting less salt from that food item, and you can put other ways to, or use other ways to flavor that meal as you're preparing it. If you can't find a low sodium or no salt added option, then just make sure that you rinse the beans really well before you start cooking with them, and that will remove a lot of the extra salt that was added in. All right, so my onions are starting to get translucent, which makes me, or lets me know that they're getting ready. So I'm gonna add now to this 2 cloves of garlic. So this is a very garlicky meal. Don't be afraid of garlic, it's your friend. At least it's my friend. It's just a wonderful way to enhance flavors without adding sodium. All right, so the garlic only needs, a minute or so to cook. You just want it to get really aromatic before you add in other things. And then I have a teaspoon of allspice and a half a teaspoon of thyme that I'm also going to add to this. I'm going to just give that, oh my gosh, my mouth is watering. I really need to start eating before I teach these classes so that I'm not ravenous while I'm preparing the meals. Oh, it smells amazing. So I'm going to turn the heat down. And then what we're using for the coconut part of our coconut beans is the light coconut milk, or reduced fat coconut milk. And I'm going to try not to spill this all over myself. So I'm going to use half of the can. I could get a measuring cup, but we're just going to eyeball it. And the reason that I picked there you go. Now you can save this. Don't store it in the can. Store it in a jar you've got lying around, or a plastic Tupperware, or something else. You don't want to refrigerate in the aluminum can. And when you do refrigerate coconut milk, has coconut oil in it, and that is one of the few saturated fat sources from plant sources, which means that when it gets cold, it gets hard. And so if you put this in the refrigerator, it will get hard, like butter gets hard when it's cold, right? And you'll just want to run it under some cold water, or spoon it out into whatever it is that you're using to, or you're cooking it in, and it will melt back up. But the first time you see it, it might seem a little like, why is it thick like that? That's why. It's the saturated fat. It just hardens it right up. And that's why you want to pick the reduced fat, because it reduces some of the saturated fat that's in there. And saturated fat, if you are unaware, is the type of fat that we try to cut back on because it's not as great for our heart and our cardiovascular system. So finding ways to cut back on saturated fat is important. This meal has no animal protein in it, and that's where we normally get saturated fat, is from animal proteins. So beef and pork have more than chicken and turkey and fish, but all of them have a small amount of saturated fat. Butter has saturated fat, olive oil doesn't. Coconut milk has saturated fat, but that doesn't mean you can't have it. It just means that we want to pick the lower, or the reduced fat option, and maybe not use the whole can in one meal. Okay, so this is my sauce for my beans to simmer in. And I've got 2 cans of red beans that I am going to add to this, and we're just gonna let them simmer and soak up all of that delicious coconut milk, allspice, thyme, garlic, yummy, yummy, yumminess. And what essentially we're gonna have is a very straightforward, simple to make rice and beans dish with tons of flavor, and I'm not adding any salt to any of it, which makes it even better for us. and it took no time to make. So I'm just gonna turn this up so it comes to a little bit of a simmer and cover it and let it do its thing. And while that, whew, steam. I'm gonna just check on our collards here, and they are starting to cook down. They're getting bright, bright green. Mix all those onions and everything. And you know, when you're cooking something like collard greens or kale or any green really, spinach, arugula, mustard greens, Swiss chard, you feel like you have a ton when you're starting off. You have this big, big bowl, and then it cooks down to essentially nothing. So always remember that when I say in the recipe that you need 2 bunches, it's because when it cooks down, it's gonna end up not really being very much at all. So, the collards are almost done. We're gonna let the beans simmer for a few minutes, and I'm gonna talk to you about what I did for the rice. Because I wanted this class to be quick and short and not have you standing around for 45 minutes watching me pontificate on the importance of whole grains and beans. I mean, even though that's very important, I did cook the rice ahead of time. Now I picked brown rice because it is a whole grain, and if we're trying to incorporate more things that are going to make us healthier into our meals, choosing whole grains is a really good option. When we say whole, that means that it's giving you everything. It's giving you all the fiber, all the vitamins, all the minerals, all the protein that grain has to offer, as opposed to a refined grain like white rice, where all of those good things are cut out, and what's left behind is the carbohydrate, which is not a bad thing. It's just that we need that other stuff too to stay healthy, right? So brown rice, if you can make that transition, will end up being a really good choice in the long run. Even if every other meal you have brown rice instead of white rice, or try to incorporate it slowly, it can be something that will make a big difference. So the one thing about brown rice is it does take a little bit longer to cook. White rice you can cook in about 20 minutes. Brown rice takes half an hour to 40 minutes. And sometimes people tell me that they don't really like the texture of brown rice, that it's harder. Well, that's the fiber and all the good stuff that's in there that makes it a little bit harder. But some ways around that is to increase the amount of water so that it actually absorbs more water and it gets softer over time. On the package, it typically says to do a 1-to-2 ratio. So 1 cup of brown rice to 2 cups of water. I normally bump that up by at least a half a cup. So in my recipe, I recommended doing 1 cup of brown rice to 2.5 cups of water. And then I also put in bay leaf to give it a little bit more flavor. You can put in other things too if you want to enhance the flavor of the rice, add another layer of flavor to the meal overall. A really great way to approach enhancing the flavor of rice is to start off by sauteing some vegetables in the bottom of the pan before you add the rice in the water. And so, for example, you could do like bell pepper, carrots, onions, celery, any mix of those, all of those, whatever is available. Saute them just in the bottom of the pan for a few minutes, dump in your rice, dump in your water, bring it to a boil, reduce to a simmer, cook, voila, you have what we call pilaf, and it doesn't really take a whole lot of effort. For this one, I just did brown rice and bay leaves, and the bay leaves offer a ton of flavor just from like 1 bay leaf, and it will just kind of meld all of the other flavors together really well also. So those are the 3 things that are simmering here on the stove, and while we wait for just a moment more for these beans, oh yeah, I'm gonna give them, oh my gosh, this smells amazing. Give them a stir and then give them a few more minutes to soak up all their yumminess. I think, or in the recipe, I said to give them about 8 to 10 minutes to cook. I think I've given them 2, so we need to let them do a few more minutes of simmering in the coconut. Let's talk about meatless meals and why we want to try to incorporate them into your weekly routine. So we eat a lot of meat in the United States. It's because it's become so widely available. Our farming practices make it so that we can get it for relatively low prices. But because of that, as just a population, we've started eating more and more and more meat over time, when really our body doesn't necessarily need as much animal protein as we have been eating. And so adding in some more vegetable-based diets, things that are going to be based in whole grains and legumes, so legumes being beans or lentils, peanuts, and grains being things like your rice, pastas, especially whole grain pasta if you can add that in, quinoa, whole grain couscous, amaranth, bulgur, I don't know, there's tons of them out there. Including a combination of those in your meals each week is going to set you up for better success in the long run. And the reasons, well, there's lots of reasons, but the ones that I'm going to focus on are first, the types of fats that you get from eating a lot of animal proteins. As I mentioned before, those saturated fats, which just aren't very good for us in large quantities, so that we can have them in small amounts. But if what you're getting is saturated fat over and over and over again, that starts to build up in your body, and it can affect the way that the blood moves through your body and the way that your heart functions. And what we want to do is make sure that we're setting ourselves up so that we have the healthiest cardiovascular system out there. So by choosing meatless meals, you're cutting back on that saturated fat some, and you're setting yourself up for better health in the long run. The other reason to choose meatless meals sometimes, again, I'm not telling you have to give up meat, but at least including them in your routine at times, is because of all of the fiber and vitamins and nutrients that the vegetable proteins have to offer us. So let me just back up for 1 second and explain to you what I mean when I say protein. So protein is what our bodies are made up of. We are protein. We're other things too, but that's what makes up our muscles and our skin and our hair. It all comes from protein. There are building blocks, and there are 9 essential amino acids that make up those proteins. We can get all 9 every time we take a bite of chicken or beef or fish. And when I say essential amino acids, that means that our body doesn't produce them, so we need to get them from other places. And so as I said, if you take a bite of chicken or a bite of turkey or a bite of beef, you're going to get all of those essential amino acids that your body does need. And that's why those animal proteins are fine. They're good. We do need them. But we can also get all of those essential amino acids from combining plant foods. So plant foods don't have all 9 at once, but combining different types of plant foods will give us all of those 9. And those different types of plant foods fall into different categories. So one are those grains. As I said, the whole grains are the ones that are going to give you the most of those essential amino acids that we need to have. So the quinoa, the brown rice, the whole wheat bread, the whole wheat pasta, amaranth. Corn is actually a grain. We think of it as a vegetable, but it's not. It's a whole grain. All of those things, if you pair a whole grain with a legume, so your beans, any kind of bean out there, the pigeon peas, the black-eyed peas, the kidney beans, cannellini beans, black beans, I don't know, there's tons of garbanzo beans, there's lots of other options out there too. Combine any of those, or a lentil, that's a legume too, or peanuts, with a whole grain, and what you're going to get is all of those essential amino acids. So you're going to get everything that your body needs, but without the saturated fat, and you're going to get a whole lot more fiber and a whole lot of more vitamins and minerals, and all of these things are things that your body wants and needs. So give it a shot. Try it. Try out a recipe like this, see what you think, and try to incorporate some more of those meatless meals into your regular routine to try to remember that we're going to use food as medicine. We're going to make these choices now to make ourselves as healthy as possible so we don't have to go to the pharmacist later and get medicine, right? This stuff tastes way better. All right, well, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to post them. I can see in the bottom and I'm happy to answer. But I think that this has all come together, so I'm going to take a peek. It smells. I'm really sorry that y'all can't smell it. I think I say this every time I do one of these classes. Oh, yeah. Yum! All right. So, and, as I said before, the longer that you can cook this on low heat, the more of these amazing flavors are going to infuse into the beans. Just check to make sure that they don't burn. But if all you've got is 20 minutes to make a meal, voila, we did it, right? So, just move this aside. I'm gonna turn this off, and this is gonna be my lunch, and I cannot wait. But let's see what we've got here. So, I've got my coconut red beans, I've got my brown rice with bay leaf, and I've got my tangy collard greens. Oh, which oh, that's hot. I forgot to add my last ingredient too. So after the collard greens have cooked, just for a little extra zip, we're gonna add in 2 teaspoons of lemon juice. Now, you can have a lemon on hand that you cut a wedge out of and squeeze. You don't have to squeeze it into a teaspoon. That would be kind of hard to measure. Just, you know, a 1/4 inch wedge would probably give you close to, or not 1/4 inch, an inch, or, let me try that again. 1/4 of a lemon squeezed would probably give you about 2 teaspoons of lemon juice. You can also get something like this. This has 47 servings in it. You can keep it in the refrigerator. It will last for a really long time, and then you can use it to flavor other meals in the future. So I put in my lemon juice, and I'm just gonna give it a stir. And then we'll plate up, give you a little peek, and send you on your way to enjoy the rest of your day. Okay, I used all my spoons. All right, so I've got some of my brown rice here, and my coconut red beans that have been simmering with that allspice and thyme, and a nice big serving of my collard greens. And there we go. A very simple, very flavorful, super nutritious dish for under $15. I hope you give it a try and enjoy. Thanks so much for joining. Check us out next week. My colleague Camila is going to actually be teaching a class in Spanish and English, and I think it's going to be fantastic. So please tune in, and we'll see you soon. Thanks. Bye.